Supersonic Special Issue 2. It starts out with a flashback talking about how Mobotropolis and its people used to be renowned the world over, and its king and queen were benevolent and much beloved. The renowned part is the only new information so far justifying this thing. It looks like the father of Antoine had a pretty boring job, doing nothing but standing next to the queen waving a flag all day. And they're supposed to be benevolent? As if that's even plausible or royalty. What's the purpose of waving that flag behind her? If she needed a fan, she could just hold a fan herself, can't she? And Mobotropolis was really its original name? Mobotropolis? This is yet another example of a name that, well, one, can't really be pronounced easily, but two, would only really make sense if it was given by people who newly immigrated to Mobius from another planet, because it comes from the word Mobius, Mobian. But Mobius is the title of the entire planet. That's like calling a city Earthopolis. I used to think Mobotropolis was only a name caused by replacing the R in Robotropolis with an M to symbolize it belonging to free Mobians again, and that would have actually made sense. It was during a war against the Overlanders that Queen Acorn disappeared, with her true fate being unknown. That's why we haven't even had her mentioned until now. Not even in flashbacks to Sally's childhood. Almost as if they just hastily made up her mother on the spot when they realized, oh, Sally should have had a mother, right? How else would she have been born? So in that flashback a while ago, where Sally first met Knuckles and she was walking with her dad, where was her mother? Was that after her mother's disappearance? And by the way, Sally has a brother too. So where was her brother in all those flashbacks? It's explained that the King's forces, led by Eggman when he was known as Warlord Julian, managed to win the war, and this is explained as what looks like Sonic fighting a Super Saiyan. Why the hell are they bothering to recap what happened after Eggman took over the kingdom? We know! We've known since issue 1! What a waste of comic space. If you haven't read issue 50 at this point, and you just go straight from Supersonic Special issue 1 to 2, you're gonna be a little confused that now Robotnik has been defeated. What's a Shangri-La? And why is Antoine so upset over turning into a junkyard? The Freedom Fighters and Jeffrey go into the place where Eggman conducted operations from, and Sally says that they need to secure the area just to be safe. What does she mean by that? If they've beaten Robotnik already, why would she still be worried about that? I guess it means destroy all the robots in the vicinity? After Jeffrey and Sonic argue very briefly, the girlfriend of Drago, who is here too for some reason, well, ex-girlfriend really, panics over a loud noise, which is revealed to be from a large robot. Sonic is knocked down and dazed when he tries to attack it. And after Sally says they need to distract a mindless killing machine by confusing it somehow, she says to execute Plan C, which Sonic has had it trained into him already to mean a plan to confuse the robot. He creates a tornado at Sonic speed, causing his friends who were swept up in the air to hit the ground, and then runs around so fast that he seems to create a copy of himself, taunting the robot, and another bullshit out of nowhere power that I can't even begin to fathom how it would work. I mean, if the copy looked like it was running, then it would make sense. But how? Sonic's friends find Snively seeming to be commanding the robot, and he runs out of the room, and Sally says to initiate Plan D for diversion, causing Bunny to distract the robot while Sonic attacks it. It sure is a good thing that the robot can't speak English, because if it could understand that I'm saying out loud what the C and D stand for and thus blatantly telling it what they plan to do to it, it would ruin the whole point of calling the players with such short, minimalistic names. After Sonic knocks down the robot, Sally warns him that there could be others, and Jeffrey, having caught Snively with his net shooter, finally getting to actually make use of that thing for once, says that they should make Snively tell them what they want to know, with Sally then having the common sense to tell them that Snively would never be willing to cooperate. He'd probably just lie to them. Even being tortured wouldn't make you incapable of lying. Sally then takes a moment to cry alone, because her former home doesn't look like home anymore. Well, I'm sure with enough redecorating you could change that. I mean, Rotor's an inventor, he can do a lot of stuff. And the next morning, she says that if she breaks her team into teams and assigns each team to a task, she could have some basic necessities up and running faster. Sally tells Antoine and Bunny to establish a source of clean running water. They'd be lucky to find that after Eggman's pollution. And tells Rotor to establish a source of power, and assigns Sonic and Tails to the role of scouting around to make sure there aren't any dangerous surprises lurking about. It's nice that she assigns Tails to that role, I guess, making use of him, having trust in him, but shouldn't it be Bunny doing that, since she's the second best at combat? Tails will fly and Sonic won't, which is probably her reasoning. But Bunny can fly too. Jeffrey is already at the armory before Sally can even assign him to anything, and he says that the facilities there have been secured. And when the king starts talking here, at the other end of a TV monitor in his hospital bed, I immediately got confused as hell the first time I tried reading the story right after Supersonic issue 1 and stopped, because I assumed I'd missed some stories. But none of those stories explained why the king went from being able to talk again when Sally stopped his crystallization process to being back in a stupor, quickly staring into space in issue 49, and now all of a sudden he's able to talk again, even to the point of giving orders? Granted, I like this better. It's much less needlessly depressing having him talk than having the king in the state he was in before. Anyways, the other thing that confused me the first time, for good reason, is that he insists that Sir Charles is a traitor. So how is he a traitor? Is the king just being paranoid? Is he not thinking straight? Is this the crystallization talking? He explains that Charles Hedgehog, there, is the one who created the roboticizer in the first place, as well as the one who created the spy network that begat traitors in the realm. The doctor interrupts his absolute monarch, telling him that he needs to rest because he's getting worked up. I guess the king isn't mean enough yet to punish him for doing that. After Jeffrey orders that nobody will go in there, especially Sally, which I was confused by, I'm even more confused by seeing what I assume are two Robians, due to their red eyes, calling Uncle Chuck Sir Charles. Huh? His name's Chuck, not Charles. Oh, don't tell me Chuck is actually an unintuitive short form for Charles, like how Dick is apparently short for Richard. This would explain why he was connected with the roboticizer and spy network, but still, the king's acting way too paranoid to treat Uncle Chuck as a villain. Doesn't he know him at all? There's something wrong with him. Sonic's father Jules shows up complaining that he doesn't appreciate freedom because he doesn't have his old body back. Skewed priorities there? That kind of stupid line isn't a good introduction to his character. By the way, I always wondered why his name was Jules of all things. But I learned really recently that actually Jules is a real life name. It's basically a French name. So does that mean Sonic is French? Alright then. At first I assumed the Robians have free will because Chuck restored it with his vendor powers, just like he did with Mutsky. But then Chuck says that the Ultimate Annihilator had restored their free will. Are you kidding me? First, it creates a bunch of zone portals for no reason, including one that sucked in Knothole, and now it magically restores everyone's free will? Bullshit! They're just happy to do everything they want for the sake of convenience. May I remind you that the only thing the weapon was programmed to do was get rid of Eggman. What does this have to do with it? There was absolutely no reason for this. It would have made more sense to just have Uncle Chuck restore the free will like with Mutsky, instead of a bullshit Deus Ex Machina doing it. Again! Uncle Chuck gives the Robians the bad news that when the original roboticizer was destroyed, because there was only one in the whole damn universe apparently, any chances of there being roboticized died with it. Makes sense since it was stated in Mecha Madness that a roboticizer can only undo the roboticization of the same person it roboticized. I guess because it stores their data in it. Chuck then explains that even if it was possible to rebuild a roboticizer the same way as before, any routine maintenance or even a minor alteration performed had affected the Robian cellular structures, meaning that he could not guarantee their surviving deroboticization in the first place. Their bodies have been changed too much. What the hell? What is that? That's a weird looking dog. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought it was Jar Jar Binks. Or something like that, some sort of Star Wars alien. I like how the Scottish dog Robian is able to look on the bright side, saying that he knows from the Great War that there are worse things to experience than this, and that his joints have never felt better. I can perfectly understand someone having that kind of viewpoint to being a robot. Is the woman that Jules is talking to Sonic's mother? I really wasn't expecting to meet her at the same time as Jules.
Also, rings? Were they using the rings to try to get back to normal off screen?
Meanwhile, Tails sees some shadows while flying around and decides to investigate. They're SWAT bots who are carrying stuff. And Sonic looks really sympathetic here by looking really worried about Tails and telling him to just stay above them and not get reckless. He's being a good brother here, being cautious, which is normally uncharacteristic of him just because he likes him so much. Then Sonic catches up with the robots and starts stealthily following them. Then they get surrounded by SWAT bots, but totally ignored as they're only interested in carrying boxes. You'd think the SWAT bots would be programmed to automatically try to attack any Mobians they see and try to roboticize them, especially Sonic, which would make a lot more sense than what Sonic is implying, that the trains are running but they're going nowhere because Robotnik's not giving out orders. Then Sonic and Tails hear cries for help, and Sonic rushes there while Tails shows worry and caution over doing so, implying that he's not as stupidly reckless as he was in the really early where he just rushed to Eggman to try to stop him immediately. He's better as a cautious foil to Sonic.
Even if we already have Sally, Rotor, Antoine, Jules, and Sonic's mom to tell Sonic to be careful. Little much, isn't it?
Then we find the green guy as Sally's trainees, Arlo, under some rubble, with Penelope being worried. I know they're technically not Sally's trainees anymore, but I guess I'm going to keep calling them that because substitute freedom fighters takes way too long to type and say. Then we see Arlo get freed by a roboticized polar bear lifting the rubble to help. Rudyard? And Sonic's talking as if he knows him. That's annoying, because we don't remember him at all. Unless he's that jerk who threatened Rotor and the Arctic Freedom Fighters. That's the only polar bear I can remember. When Sonic sees his parents again, at long last, instead of being grateful that they're even around at all and hugging them, he just shouts at Uncle Chuck, "How could you keep this from me?" for them being roboticized, and I guess, and runs off, realistically upset.
Doesn't look too upset with that expression. How could Chuck have been only doing what Jules asked him to if they didn't know they were going to be roboticized ahead of time? How could they make that plan?
Chuck really shouldn't have kept the truth from him, because there was no point in doing so. It should have been obvious that they had gotten roboticized. Then Hamlin reacts with an unnecessary amount of surprise and fear at seeing Robians walking up to him.
I guess because he assumes they're dangerous on instinct.
And in a heartwarming moment, Sally hugs Uncle Chuck upon seeing him again. And as I expected from his outburst earlier, Hamlin is a racist against Robians, saying, "Aren't they still robots?" What difference does that make? Oh, Sonic's not upset because his parents are robots. He's upset because Chuck never told him his parents were still alive. Okay, now it makes a lot more sense that he'd be angry at Chuck. He had no fucking reason to not tell him they were still alive. Tails does make a
good point.
That even if Chuck had told him the full truth, it will be different. His parents were casualties of Eggman, just not in the sense he thought. Sonic says, "At least I know my parents were still there for me." And that's why I'm on Sonic's side. Especially since, at least if they were still alive, he at least had the hope that once he beats Eggman, he could get them de-roboticized somehow. It's better than them being dead. Tails brings up that Sally knew her father was still alive in total silence, but that didn't make things any easier for her. After Tails makes Sonic realize the obvious, that Chuck was just trying to do him a favor, Sonic calls him a brick, which I think means stupid, but Tails seems to take it as a compliment. Huh? First off, it's more like Fleetway Sonic to just insult Tails randomly like this. And second, Tails is not stupid enough to take that as a compliment just because Sonic's smiling while saying it. And third, what about what Tails was doing justified calling him a brick? That line by Sonic could have easily not been written. No, those are the flaws that annoy me the most. Sally says to Nicole that she never thought she'd say this, but the situation is hopeless. I like that. It makes it clear that she's the type of person who doesn't want to give up and admit that there's no point in trying. It's always good to keep having character moments like this, reaffirming a person's good and bad qualities to keep them interesting instead of bland, by making us forget that they have a personality at all. Anyways, Sally says that she'd be better off rebuilding elsewhere than trying to restore Movitropolis to its former self, because Robotnik's changed it too much. Nicole encourages her, and after After Jeffrey does the same, out of being a good friend, then out of desperation tries to win Sally back, Sonic sees him and starts a fight with him. I really hope he doesn't blame Sally and accuse her of cheating on him when that'd be totally uncharacteristic of her and uncharacteristically stupid of him. The fight gets broken up when Bunny sprays the two with a water hose, and Sally wastes time making the two shake hands and say they're friends now, which should be obvious that won't do anything. We then cuts to the tents where I was really confused by the text bubble and then the next panel showing Sally talking to Nicole, as I wondered who the hell was calling who Daddy. Nicole? Of course it was Sally saying that it might be better for the morale of the citizens if everyone knew their king was in charge. And Nicole reassures her that she's doing a great job, and no one must find out. Unfortunately, the king gets me suspicious of him again when he tells Sally that even her own friends can't know that he's the one making the decisions now, who usurped her leadership. Why aren't they already aware of this? Wasn't it assumed this would be the case the minute the king started talking again? I like how Dr. Quack looks at him funny for acting so power-hungry and paranoid, proving that we're supposed to be suspicious of him. That it's a case of out of character is serious business, rather than bad writing. I like that Sally lampshades this, saying, "This isn't right, Nicole." You're right, it isn't. Sally should be in charge. That's the whole point and worth of her character, is to be the leader of the freedom fighters. It would be heresy if someone else who wasn't doing anything in the action and risking their lives was sitting on their couch ordering the freedom fighters around. Like Hamlin. Imagine if Hamlin was in charge of her. That would be absolute bullshit. Nicole reminds me why I like her so much again by pointing out her hypocrisy. Nor is it the first time you've kept secrets from Sonic and your friends. Only to disappoint me by talking as if she was somehow justified in being sneaky because she's the leader. Because the leader can do anything they want. The Robians tell Sally that they took a vote, and for now they believe it's in the best interest of the Robians to just start their own colony, with the implied reason being that the Mobians are racist assholes who don't trust them. We took a vote, though. That's weird. As if democracy has any power in an absolute monarchy. In front of a princess and a king. Is the king okay with this? Rotor then gets the main computer back online and watches an airship going off to the Devil's Gulag. At first I was confused because I thought this was a ship with the Robians in it and they were somehow going to try to start a colony in a prison or nearby it. But it turns out the airship was just going there to check on the prisoners. Once a week. Wait, once a week? What kind of prison leaves their prisoners unsupervised for most of the week? Is that just begging for a prison break or something? I mean, what if they get a medical emergency? The sole story of this issue was by Ken Penders, and I had a lot of moments where I just found it confusing. It also doesn't feel like there was much going on, like it was slow. But that's perfectly justified and comes with the territory, considering that this takes place in the aftermath of Robotnik, as they're going to revisit Robotropolis to reclaim it. Of course it's quiet. It's not fair to expect anything else right now. I do appreciate the whole intrigue with the king acting suspicious. I can't wait to see it get developed on more. I was surprised at seeing Sonic's mother at the same time as his father. I thought they'd have to go on a whole adventure to find her. I don't know, it feels too easy. But as much as it annoys me seeing innocent roboticized people get discriminated against, I do like that this is a plot point, because people really are that awful. And this is a world where people have been trained to hate robots, and where some of these robots look like roboticized people. At this point, it's probably so instinctive to hate Robians that they just can't help but keep being afraid of them. After this issue, instead of returning to the Knuckles comic, we're getting to have some time with the main comic again, from issues 53 to 55.